Hi, my name is Pandora, and this is a video about using registration marks and creating a template for use with print and cut and sign cut, if, that is, you don't use the American letter size. This is for people who use different sizes. Still, it may find it interesting. So, the first thing I'm going to do is bring up my layers palette, and I do that by pressing Control, Shift, plus the letter L on my keyboard. And this is pretty typical of me. I use layers a lot in order to be able to do things. And just before I go any further, and before I forget, there's a quick tip about this that I want to share. If, as I do a lot, I click on the layers top line there and drag it away, I often drag it away during my videos and show it as a separate floating palette. Now, often people want to go back and put it back into the docking area. And you can try kind of clicking and dragging over here and it'll expand, but you find once you resize it, it still is floating. So how do you get it back in the docking area? Well, the answer is that if you come across with your mouse, and it's going to be slightly tight to see because of the way the screen records. If you possibly can see here, I've got a double-headed arrow. If I click and drag and expand the docking area so I've got room to put the palette back. Now, instead of clicking with my left mouse on the top layers letter here, if I click on the second one and I click and drag and let go, you can see it's returned to the palette area. This is something it took me an absolute age to find out, so I'm hoping that might save you some angst. Then if I close it and I pressed Shift, Control and L again, it reappears in the docking palette. Just something that's useful to know. What we want to do is deal with registration marks, so what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to lock this introduction text layer, and I'm going to do that by clicking on the padlock here, and then I'm going to make sure I can't see it because that will interfere with what I want to do next, so I'm going to click on the eye. I'm going to click up onto the registration marks layer, and I'm going to click on the eye to open it, and there's nothing there. And that's because I wanted to show you typically what I do when I'm doing this, or what I have been doing until I found out a better way, is to click on File and then Import, and then in my Black Cat folder, because it seemed like a really good place to keep it, I have a new registration file. There's actually two here because I saved it on two different occasions, but if you find, they're actually identical. Now, I want to say thank you to Loupy, aka Louise Paisley, from the timemachines.com forum, from which I got this actual file in the first place. She does a great tutorial on manual calibration, so you might want to check that out sometime. Anyway, if I zoom out a bit, you will see that, said she, clicking on the plus sign, actually I've got it in portrait and I want to work in landscape. So what I'm going to do is click on the select button, come up here to the toolbar and click on the rotate selection by 90 degrees clockwise. Then I'm going to bring up my align and distribute objects palette, and that will automatically shift my layers palette down one. So I'm just going to expand that so we can see what we're up to with that one. And here, relative to, there is a whole heap of selections over here. You can have last selected, first selected, biggest, smallest, page, drawing selection. I'm going to select page for my particular option, and I'm going to say, please center it horizontally and vertically. And then I'm going to come up the toolbar and say zoom to fit page in window, just so you can see what I'm up to. Now, it took me a while, and some things do, as you've probably found out if you're watching any of my videos, that actually this restricted pretty much what I could use in terms of an A4 page. And if I click and drag on it and move it to a corner, you can see actually for me there is quite a lot of wasted space, and eventually I worked out that this is sized for the American letter page, which is 8.5 by 11 inches. I'm using A4, which is somewhat bigger. So if there are several ways you could bring up document properties. You can go to File and then to document properties, and this dialog box will appear. Or another way to do it, which is slightly quicker because it's one less click, is up here on the end of the toolbar, there's a thing that says edit properties of this document to be saved with the document. It's the same thing exactly. If you click on this, again, the document print windows will come up. Properties window will come up. So at the moment you can see I'm selecting A4, which if I put into inches on both, and down here, you can see it's 11.69 by 8.27. So it's slightly longer than, slightly narrower than the American letter size, which is 8.5 by 11. So if I just switch to a US letter and say OK, what you can see in the document window is that actually now this works quite well in here. There's still a bit of wasted space, but that's probably to do with the person who set it up's printer margin. And I'll explain that as I go along. I'm going to click on this little icon again and say, no, I actually want to work in A4, and click on close at the top here. So one of the things that you could do is you could simply click and drag on one of these arrows to make it bigger. The problem with that is I find that these markers, the registration marks, can actually get stretched, and that doesn't seem to be a very good thing. It doesn't seem to work very well if you don't have them in the right size. So looking down at the very bottom text bar here, it says Group 1 object in registration layers. So that tells me it's a group. Often, if you want to union things, you'll find if you look down here, it'll say things like one of these objects is not a pass, so cannot complete Boolean operation or some other such thing. Often, if you want to union something and you can't, it's because it's a group. And the thing that you need to do is ungroup it. So, if I make sure it's selected, come up to Object and click on Ungroup, you think that would do the job, except down here it now tells me there's a group of 4 objects in the layer. So that means I need to ungroup it again, and often you'll find in order to union things, you need to ungroup them 2 or 3 times sometimes to get them done. So I'm going to go back to the object and click on Ungroup. If you want to remember it, it's Shift plus Control plus G. So now I can see that I've got 4 individual objects because it tells me 4 objects of type group in the layer. So what I want to do is move these out to give me the max amount of space, because when I'm printing and cutting, or cutting out in any way, or doing contour cut in any way, I want to use the max amount of space available. So what I'm going to do is try and move them out so they're actually level. If I click on the toolbar and drag, I'll pull down a guide. Now this will show you that actually these lines here, the crosshairs, are completely aligned, and it's important that you keep these completely aligned. Likewise, on the vertical, if I cross just to this one here, you can see these are completely aligned. So it doesn't really matter where you move these to, but you must make sure that they are aligned. So I'm just going to click and drag the guides out of the way. Guides are terribly useful for lining things up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag a box, imaginary box, around the area. So I've got both of these selected, and then I'm just going to use my keys on my keyboard to move these across a bit. And that seems to look quite good to me. I'm going to click and drag around the bottom 2, and again use the down arrow on my keyboard and just check that that looks okay. To check that these will actually print correctly, and it will be different depending on your printer, and obviously I've got this paper sized for A4, but if you are lucky enough to have an A3 printer or a 12 by 12 printer or whatever it is you have, you could obviously size the document to your appropriate size and then move the registration marks in the same way, so you get a good template for your registration marks and your printer. Just to check, I'm going to go to File, Print, and I have my Canon set up for print preview. So when I click on Print, I can see that actually these all print pretty clearly. Now, I don't need to print at the moment because I'm just creating a template. So I'm going to cancel printing and come back to this document. So having done all of that work, adjusting it so it fits your printer absolutely accurately, one of the great things would actually be to have it available at all times. And you can, providing you save it as a template. It isn't very difficult, but it's just a couple of steps. So normally, when you want to open a new Inkscape file, you can go to File, New, and across here there's a whole pile of templates that are already available for you. And one is A4 Landscape, one is A4, one is the default template. And I have one here that I created myself, and that's what I'm attempting to show you, which is Landscape Registration Template. How do I do that? Well, ensuring that the template is available to you, when you want to save it, you need to follow this path to find the right templates. So it's your C drive, program files, the Inkscape folder, the share folder within that, and the templates folder within that. Now, because on this file I've got the template, I have the registration marks, and I also have this text, I don't actually want to save all of this. So let me just swap for a moment over to a secondary file which I have open. And this one has 2 layers in it, and let me use Shift, Control, and L to bring up the layers palette. Now, I decided that what I wanted to do was have 2 layers. The bottom layer is the registration marks, and if I click on the eye, it'll switch it off and switch it on. I set my screen so it is landscape. I've locked this registration layer, so I cannot possibly select the registration marks. And then I created a new layer by clicking on this plus button, and I've left it unlocked, and I made sure it's selected so that I've checked that everything is the way I want it to be when I save my document. And then, in order to save it as a template, I come across to File, and I click on Save As. I go to Computer, to my C drive, and scroll down till I get to Program Files, and then scroll down until I get to Inkscape. And down at the bottom in the Inkscape folder, I'll find the share file. And then if I scroll down again, I'll find templates. And I decided to call mine A4 Landscape Registration, so I'd recognize which file it was. And then I click on Save. Now, I've already saved this file, but just so you know, if I did click on Save, it does say the file already exists. Do I want to replace it? And if I was amending the file, then I'd simply say replace, because I don't particularly want to amend it because I already have it saved. I'm just going to click on cancel and just cancel everything out. So, if you have a different sized printer to perhaps the letter printer, if you can print in A3, if you can print in 12 by 12, or if you want to print in A4, set up the registration marks exactly where you want them to be. Do check with you in your print preview that they will print accurately, and then use this file path, Program Files, Inkscape, Share, Templates. If I just switch that off for a moment, come back to my introductory text. If you have any requests, I'd be very happy if I know how to make a quick video in order to say how to do it. And you can email me at myrequest@btinternet.com.